It's really nice to be here with you, Willem and Geoff. I remember it was back in 1996, Willem, that I first met you. And at the time, I was already working as a psychotherapist. I was working as a trainer. I was working with couples and intimacy. And of course, when you work with couples and intimacy, you work with sexuality. And I also had just come back from a year sabbatical of traveling around to different places, learning about, looking for the best teachers that could teach sexuality. Because I realized from my private practice at the time that actually the psychotherapy available for people, including my own training, although I had 8 years of training as a psychotherapist, it had not covered anything to do with sexuality. And nevertheless, when I was sitting with individuals or couples, or even when in the groups, the stuff that comes up again and again was around everybody is looking for love. And everybody is looking for a way of finding a partner to share intimate love, and that means sexual intimacy. And I could not find anybody within the mainstream that actually dealt with that in a satisfactory way for me. I knew that you could go to very good, interesting teachings that I did, which were on the shamanistic side or on the tantric side. And what I was looking for was a bridge that actually could speak to people like ourselves in our everyday life around what is it like to be a man and a woman trying to live together, bring up a family, have a sexual relationship. How do we manage to stay together through all the changes in life? And then at some stage I was doing some of this stuff and somebody said to me, you need to check out Willem Poppeliers. I said, Willem who? And it turned out that not long after this, that you were putting on something was called Practitioners Review Program for people just like myself who were already professionals. And so I went along. That was down in Eden Rock the first time we met in Spain. And I think it was within the first day I realized that I had found what I was looking for. Just by the way you were approaching it. And that is now, like it was back in 96, so we're talking 22 years ago.
Yes.
So I'm delighted to have a chance to actually spend some time now together with you also, Geoff, who you will introduce yourself in a minute, to really try to see if we can get people an idea of what is sexual grounding therapy. Because the title itself, whenever people ask me, what is it? And I try to explain it, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Whereas I know from having 20 years of doing this work, both as participating and also later as a therapist and a trainer, once you do the work, your body knows it. It makes sense in the cells. So I've never yet met a person, once we do it, that hasn't actually realized this is really something different. And yet, I have come down to now when people ask me what I do around sexual grounding therapy, I tend to say, I help men and women to come back to their natural state of being in their bodies, in their full capacity of being loving, sexual, relational human beings. And here we are sitting in beautiful nature and talking about how do we bring back men and women back to their natural selves. Because that is one of the things I really found that you have been busy with for a very long time. We will hear about that. And have really found a method to work with that in my experience work more like they say in the it touches the parts that no other beer does. So before we move on, maybe can you just introduce yourself a little bit, Geoff, so people know who we are?
Okay, so my name is Geoff Lamb, and I'm slightly newer to the work than Helena is. I did my very first sexual grounding course in 2006 with Willem. But previous to that, I'd been practicing as a psychotherapist for probably 23, 24 years. And I trained in Reichian bioenergetic therapy. Clearly, that has a lot to do with sexuality. But for me, there was still something missing. something I wasn't getting. I mean, don't want to go into too much detail here, but it was particularly around the erotic transference and counter-transference that we hadn't managed to work with in as much depth as I wanted to. And sexual grounding offered me personally and also professionally something that addressed the sort of question that Helena was putting forward. How do we as men and women live fulfilled and exciting and vibrant relationships, not just for the first 5 years, but for the whole of our lives? So I don't want to say any more. I want to hand over to Willem.
Yeah. So Willem, would you be okay with saying just a little bit about your background and then maybe move into like how you came to develop sexual grounding therapy?
I can do that. Thank you for having me here. Thank you too. And I like to start with one thing what kept me all my life busy, and that was masculinity and femininity. Because I grew up in a family with brothers and sisters, and I experienced in my life from my father and my mother, there were parts in the education which were appropriate for me, and other parts in relation to intimacy. It was a difference how they react on my sisters and on me. Of course, brothers and sisters are different in the organism and in body form, but they have also a lot of things in common. And in my family, I was looking for what they have in common, where we can meet, because sexuality is a difficult thing, also in families, to be open, to be spontaneous. It is very often something secret. We don't talk so openly about it. And this first experience, in my family, that brings me up. I like to be plunged in this, to get to the core of this, you know. So that was the first thing, the first motive. The second motive was that I was a server in the church. And what I experienced in the church was when women were pregnant and they got the delivery of a baby, they had to come in the church and they had to have a new introduction in the church. And the first thing was, for me, was why women do have this and man does not have this.
What do you mean introduction to the church?
They could not receive the holy sacraments when they have delivered the baby. And for me it looks like, what is this? And they said, yeah, they have to be repurified.
So there's something unclean about the baby.
For a woman?
Yeah, so what happens was that I said to the clerics at that time, I don't understand it. Can you explain why for men it's not necessary and for women it is necessary?
Very good question, Willem.
Mm-hmm. And they couldn't give me an answer. They would talk about repurification, and I said to them, yeah, listen, if the woman has to repurify it, the man has also to repurify it. That's for me logic. But what they said was unclear, not understandable for me, but from the other side, it gives me a new intrinsic motive to go and search and to be more and more curious to get and invest energy to find this out. That was my intrinsic motivation.
So very interesting. Already from the beginning, you are interested in. You started talking about in families we don't talk easily around sexual issues, and that we know very well is still very much a topic.
Yes.
Like currently in the UK, like we in 2018, and there's currently now in September this year, I believe, the statutory duty to actually give relationship and sex education in schools.
Right.
But they're struggling to find out how to provide this.
Yeah. To give it form. Yeah.
So you're already talking about the issue in families, that even although we are created, that the parents, the mom and dad, are the ones who are having the sexual intercourse, and that's where we all come from. And we have difficulties talking about it. And on top of that, you also, it's not often you hear sexual issues and the church mentioned in the same place. So I think we already have the social setting in which we are dealing with these issues of sexuality,
Yes, yeah.
masculinity and femininity, and just how current it is. That despite all of our seeming freedom and liberation about these issues, it seemed to be not just you and me, Geoff, who were looking for something different.
No, I think most of the people who come to me in my private practice, and I think probably for you too, they're looking for the same thing.